Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Rebecca, and today I'm going to talk about downward facing dog. Probably the yoga pose that everybody's heard about, everybody knows what it looks like. But today I'm going to tell you about some of the benefits of the pose, and then we're going to go to the studio and I'm going to walk you through it step by step. Okay, so I've got one of the asana cards out of the yoga teacher's toolbox. And here we have downward facing dog, also known as Adho Mukha Svanasana in Sanskrit. You almost never hear your yoga teacher say that because it's a mouthful. So this pose, it teaches us, it's a bit of an inversion. So the hips are above, the heart is above the head. And this symbolizes how to integrate wisdom with compassion. Okay. And downward facing dog, you'll see that it activates all of the chakras along the spine. And it's considered a stabilization pose in yoga therapy. And you'll notice that your yoga teacher probably uses this pose quite a bit between transitions in your class. And that's because it helps to, once we've done a series of poses on one side, in a vinyasa class, typically you'll do a few poses on one side and then switch to the next. And we often use downward facing dog as a transition between the two because it helps to stabilize the pelvis, elongates the hamstrings and the back side of the body, and we get to stretch through the shoulders and realign the spine once again. So this pose balances 4 of the major energy currents. So this yoga pose balances 2 of the energy currents and activates 3 of the energy currents. It balances prana and apana. So prana is the vital life force, apana is the downward flow, and it activates samana, which is that center of the body energy responsible for digestion. It activates udana vayu, which is in the head because you're upside down. And it activates Vyana Vayu because you're using all of the limbs together. Okay, so let's go to the studio and I'll show you how to do it step by step. All right, so downward facing dog. Everybody knows this pose. It seems simple enough, but it's really not. So for beginners, your hands are gonna be shoulder width apart at least, maybe even wider. So I'm actually going to turn the mat here for a second. All right, so here we are, downward facing dog. Hands are going to start out below the shoulders, and you want to make sure the fingers are spread wide. So the foundation of any pose begins with what's touching the mat. Feet, hands, whatever it is, it's the foundation. I prefer my hands to be a little bit wider than the shoulders, and I like to have my index fingers pointing straight forward. A lot of this has to do with the way your arms are built. Some people have more rotation here than others. Some people have hyperextension in the elbows. Some people have more opening in the shoulders. I don't have that much opening in my shoulders, so I prefer a wider grip in downward facing dog. I often turn my hands out, so either you want the index fingers pointing forward, or sometimes for me, I even point them out a little bit, okay? So I'm gonna, knees are underneath the hips, feet are 8 inches apart or so, and we're gonna lift the hips up and back. So you can see as I lift the hips up and back, right, as the head releases down, let your neck go a little bit, gaze is down between your heels, okay? You can see that my shoulders are not squished into my ears. They're kind of relaxed and open. That's why I like to have my hands pointed out just a little bit. Fingers are spread wide. And you'll press down. You'll notice, you can do like a little practice here. Go into downward facing dog, come back up and look at your hands and see which part the blood flows into, what parts are red. And that's how you know what parts of the hand you're pressing into. So you want to make sure that the hands, all parts of the hand are pressing equally into the floor. Okay, so let's turn and look from the side view. All right, so from here, right? So hands a little bit wider than the shoulders. I'm gonna lift the hips up and back, and as I do that, I'm drawing the lower belly in from just above the pubic bone to the belly button. That's lifting up and back. Beginners, you can keep your knees bent. Try to get a straight line from the wrists to the hips. As you develop that hamstring flexibility, the legs can straighten. Heels may come to the floor, they don't have to. Okay, so as you're in downward facing dog, you want to try to lift from here. So often when you first start out, a lot of the weight goes in the shoulders and it feels really heavy and it feels like it's a lot of work to hold down dog. As you start to practice and you realize a lot of it happens down here and that's where the lift comes from, it takes a lot of the weight and pressure off of the wrists and the shoulders. So try to work towards that. Make sure you're taking full breaths, and on each exhale you sort of draw that in and lift upward.